All right, for those of you who didn't know, my boy Gifso is here on the global side of the game. I feel like a lot of people didn't realize he was here because he was on the Kahono and Kyoto banner, and a lot of people skipped on that banner because we know what's coming next, right? We have the Academy units coming next with Mommy Charlotte, we have Fuegoleon, and we also have Jack, which are all very hype characters. But this character right here is probably one of the most goated and hype SR characters. Like, if you pulled him, but you didn't pull Kahono or Kyoto, you are still absolutely winning. Okay, so today we're going to talk about his skills, what skills you want to upgrade, what skill cards you want to equip to him, what gear you want to put on Gifso, whether or not you should enhance him, what talents you want to run on the talent tree, and then of course, what teams is he good on for PvE. Okay, so let's start by talking about his skill 1. His skill 1 is a single target attack. It's called Monster Creation Piranha, and this grants an increased attack level 1 buff to the ally with the lowest HP ratio for 1 turn. That's honestly okay. But then it gets way more crazy with the rest of these skills. Like, this is where he starts to get good. So skill 2 is called Let the Games Begin. It is an AoE attack, and what this is going to do is it grants all allies a 25% increased favored damage dealt buff for 2 turns. That is insanely good, okay? But it gets better. 40% chance to grant all allies a 15% increased damage dealt to boss buff for 2 turns. But it gets better, okay? And then if you look down at the upgrade effect, right, you can increase how much favored damage your allies are going to be doing. So it goes from 25%, if you get it all the way upgraded, to 40% increased favored damage dealt, plus the 15% to the boss, which only has a 40% chance to proc, but that's still insanely good, right? So that in and of itself is nuts. Imagine that buff right there, the 45% increased damage dealt on Raya, right? Plus the additional 15% to the boss on Raya. Yo, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And then his special skill is called Monster Creation Giant Eel. It is a single target attack. It grants all allies an increased all attack level 2 buff for 2 turns. That means it increases both attack and magic attack. So that is a good support for attack characters or magic attack characters, which is solid. And then he also has a 50% chance to remove poison from an ally. Okay, that's not that great, but like the increased all attack is still pretty decent. And then here's where it gets really good. His combo skill. His combined attack grants a 60% increased favored damage dealt buff to the partnered mage and self for 15 turns. For 15 turns. That is absolutely crazy. Okay, so you get 60% increased damage, favored damage dealt right there. You could potentially get 45% there, right? That is 105% increased favored damage dealt, plus another 15% damage to a boss. Yo, Gifso is cracked. He is absolutely cracked. So just imagine him with Raya, the amount of damage that you can do to a boss. This is what people are running in Squad Boss right now. Okay, so it's really good. Now let's talk about the skill cards you can equip to him to maximize his potential. So one such skill card would be a support skill card. It is Finroll's support skill card, and what this does is it gives a 50% chance to grant 10% increased mobility upon using skill 2. Why is that good? Well, if you give Gifso extra mobility, that increases the chance that he is going to go before your partnered mage, and you're going to be able to use your combo skill before your partner mage, like Raya has their turn, thus giving him the increased favored damage, so when it gets to their turn, then they can nuke with their special skill, right? So ideally, since Gifso is a support character who needs to go before your attack character, you want as much mobility on him as possible, so this is a pretty good skill card for that reason, okay? Other skill cards you could run are his, all right? And what this does is it grants a 5% to 10% increased HP recovery received, and a 5% increased max HP to self. That's okay, but I don't know. I wouldn't really worry too much about giving survivability to Gifso, so it's really not that worth it. And then you also have this right here, the additional effect on skill 2, which gives you a 70% chance to dispel bleed from all allies. Like, that could be okay, but really I don't see people running the skill card on him too much because I feel like there's just going to be better skill cards. But this is definitely an option you could run on him if you happen to pull it. I would personally run one of the other ones, either the one I just showed you or one of these ones. So the one I am a personal fan of, and I think a lot of people are for supporters, is Sally's skill card, Insatiable Quest, and upon using skill 2 applies 10% increase all attack to the ally with the highest attack for 2 turns. That's really, really good because the whole idea of using Gifso is to get your ally to have a giant nuke, right? And so if you run this on his skill 2, which is already giving favored damage and extra damage against bosses, it's kind of nuts, right? So this is really like the best skill card you can equip to Gifso to make him useful, okay? And then you also have the Captain's Condemnation with William's skill card, and this one, upon using skill 2, grants the ally with the lowest HP recovery equal to 6 to 10% of their maximum HP. So sometimes your nuker, like Raya, gets low because they don't have the greatest HP pool, or they don't have the best defense gear on, or whatever, right? Well, this could be somewhat useful when using skill 2 because it will give them a little bit of HP in addition to giving them the favorite damage buff. So this is an option you could definitely go for, but like I said, Sally's is probably still the best. And one more option you could go for is the SR, Oath of Protection, with Vanessa's skill card, and this one is actually pretty good. It applies a 20 to 40% increased damage resist to the ally with the lowest HP for 1 turn upon using skill 2. So if your attacker happens to have the lowest HP and it's Raya, it just adds another buff to him. That overall increases his damage. Otherwise, it's just going to help your other allies, whoever has the lowest HP, survive a little bit longer, which could be useful as well. Okay, so any of these skill cards would work on Gifso, but like I said, I really, really like Sally's skill card. I think that would potentially work the best on him. Okay, now let's talk about the gear you want to be running on this boy. So ideally, you are going to be running magic attack over attack. I just happen to have attack gear, and I've kind of switched the set around different characters because I don't have a lot of these pieces of gear, so I kind of have to use this because it's all I got right now. But ideally these are going to be magic attack pieces, right, for the main stat. That's kind of what you want. But Gifso is an SR character. He's not going to be doing a lot of damage, so while that will give you the most damage that you can get out of him, it's not going to be that much. Okay, so don't really worry too much about that. I wouldn't really worry about your main stats here. More so what you're going to be worried about is the sets that you're going for. Okay, so you are going to want a full mobility set on Gifso if you can. Okay, that is going to give him speed +5, and he already has pretty decent speed at 108, but that +5 is going to allow him to go before your attackers, and then he is going to be able to give them increased favor damage before they have their turns. Okay, so ideally on most supporters you want a speed set because it's going to let them go before your attackers, and it's going to let them buff your attackers, right? So that's what you want on Gifso. You could also go for another half speed set if you wanted, but it only works with a debuff on them, I believe, for the other normal speed set that's not the gold speed set, right? Or you could go for like what I have here, which is a half defense set. I really like doing this because Gifso doesn't feel like he has the most health or defense, right? And he can die fairly easily. He's kind of a glass cannon. And so I like to run the defense +30% on him along with the mobility because it just helps keep him alive longer, all right? And when I talk about gold sets, I try to explain this once a video or once every 2 or 3 videos just because people don't necessarily understand what sets are in this game, right? So a set is a type of Secret of the Deep Sea set, and then you have different pieces of gear that fit into that set. If you get all 4 pieces of gear equipped, then you'll get that set bonus, right? If you have just 2 pieces, then you get the 2-piece set bonus. And this is what's called a gold set because it gives you grants the wearer a 5% increased speed buff. It gives you a percent buff, right? Whereas other ones will give you just like a flat +250. Not a percentage. Percentages are typically almost always going to be better unless it's in the case of the speed right here where it gives speed +5. That just adds +5 speed to your overall value, which is insanely good. Okay, so if we go to sets here, this is where you can find your different sets. You have your attack set, your defense set, your HP set, so on and so forth, right? And then over here you have your gold attack set, defense, and HP sets. The only difference is they have a gold star on them to like differentiate between what's normal and what is a gold set. So if you look right here, here is a regular attack set. plus 220, plus 220. It doesn't have percentages, right? So ideally, whenever you're building a gear set on people, you want them to be gold sets to give the most amount of stats possible. That's going to allow your character to be as fast as possible and to have the best defense possible. Okay, so that's kind of what you want on Gifso there. And then in terms of enhancement, should you be worrying about getting him to 2 stars or to 5 stars, okay? Well, getting him to 2 stars gives you a 20% chance to grant self remove 1 debuff at the start of a turn. That's okay. I feel like it's not really necessary with Gifso, right? So you can probably not need that. And then at 5 stars, it gives you a 30% chance to remove 2 debuffs. It's still not really worth it. It does give you a little, like a tiny bit more damage resist and a tiny bit more endurance to get them to 5 stars, but like, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I mean, if you're going to use versatile like mage pieces, probably not on Gifso, since there are SR versatile mage pieces. But if you happen to pull extra copies of him, like why not give him a little bit of extra damage resist? So you might as well put them into him. But it's just not really necessary. Okay, so don't worry too much about enhancing him. I would say if you pulled him, you've already won, and just be happy with that. You know, you don't really need to enhance him. Now, in terms of talents, what should you guys be doing for the attack tree? Well, it doesn't really matter what you do for the attack tree. Personally, I would recommend probably actually going for the attacks after granting a 10% increased damage dealt buff upon attacking a boss, because with his combo skill, he does give himself favored damage and the ally favored damage, if I remember right. I think I just went over this, right? It was himself and the ally. Grants a 60% increased favored damage buff to the partner mage and self. Yeah. So he does give himself increased favored damage. So he can do some damage, obviously, and this will just help him do a little bit more damage to the boss, right? He's not going to do a ton, but it'll help him do a little bit more. And then I'd also go for the magic attack plus 7, because once again, ideally, you want to build him with the magic attack set. And then as for defense, I would go for the 20% defense, and I would go for the defense plus 4% and crit resist plus 2%. That stacks up to 5 times at the start of a wave. Generally, I almost always recommend these 2 defense slots because they're just the best. 20% defense, you can't really beat that, right? We have debuff immunity when your HP is below 35%, but at that point, it doesn't really matter because you're probably going to die with this character. We have crit resist plus 10%, which could be okay. We have fortify upon being attacked by a boss. So another option you could run is like crit resist and fortify, right? As opposed to the defense plus 20 and the stacking defense and crit resist. But I feel like the stacking, you're getting stacking defense and crit resist here. So why do you need crit resist there and extra fortify from the boss? I don't know. I feel like this is just the better option. It will pretty much always be the better option, right? But this is definitely another option you could go. You could go for the guardian buff and you could go for the crit resist buff. And then I wouldn't ever really go for the increased max HP on Gifso because you're not really going to need it, okay? And then support wise, you are probably not going to need the swiftness buff because you're going to be using your combo skill more often than not. So your SP is not going to drop low enough to actually make use of this. So what I would actually probably go for is for the damage resist and also for the skill 2 cooldown. That way, potentially, you can use your skill 2 more often to increase the favored damage even more on your allies. Okay, so that's kind of what I go for on Gifso's talent trees, and I feel like those talents are going to be the ones that work best for him. Now, in terms of teams that Gifso can fit on, we're only going to talk about PvE, right? Because he is an SR character, he's definitely a PvE SR character, and you're ideally not going to run him in PvP. Could it be done? Absolutely, but I just wouldn't recommend it. All right, so this is a really, really good team. You could run in even the squad boss that's going on right now. The blue squad boss, I've seen a couple of people actually beat that squad boss with this team. I have attempted it myself, but my Raya isn't quite strong enough yet, and my Gifso, his skill 2 isn't upgraded, and ideally you want to have his skill 2 upgraded to be able to take on the squad boss, right? So yeah, here we are. But this is a pretty good team, right? And this is the team I would potentially run for Gifso, because once again, ideally for the upgrades, you're going to upgrade his skill 2 first to give himself extra increased favor damage, then you'll upgrade the combo skill, right, to give yourself a little bit more damage against bosses, and then by upgrading your skill 2 first and then your combo skill, you're going to be able to buff Raya to the maximum amount. And so that's kind of how I would run this character. And anyways, guys, that is the video. Hopefully that helped you out a little bit with building Gifso. Hopefully the team idea gave you an idea maybe for taking on future boss content, or maybe even the current squad boss content. But if you guys did enjoy the video, please consider going down there, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.